All right, greetings YouTube, and welcome to a little bit more of an in-depth and demonstration video of the Hyperpiano DSP version 3 system as it is currently set up. There will definitely be more to come and more options and things like that, but let's just sort of talk about the basic issue and how it all pretty much works. So basically what it is that this is an abstract representation of the inside of a piano, and I am splitting the regions of this piano area that I have into 8 regions for a total of 8 times 32 semitones, which is roughly from C2 to G4. And there are 6 instrument sounds that I can play at the moment. Those instrument sounds are basically the first being essentially the bass instrument, B-A-S-E instrument, and this is the grand piano that I'm basically playing, which is, you know, a basic decent sound font grand piano essentially sound. And the other instruments are all different ones. The instrument 1 and 2 are a synthesizer called Plaits, which I'll maybe talk a little bit more in depth about. Number 3 is sort of a carpless, strong, plucked model synthesizer that is pretty versatile, but it sort of does its one thing that it does. And number 4 is actually another sound font player with a collection of samples and stuff like that. So just to show how the way it basically works is that you can assign any region of the piano, the virtual piano here, to a sound. And to do that, you basically press the Set Single button like that, and then you pick which one you want to make the sound. So you can do whatever you want. I'm gonna pick this one, which is basically the sound font player. It's just an easy one to demonstrate for now. So, and that means that basically when I get to this one, sorry, it's always number 2. So this one will be this is actually like a prepared piano that I've done, that has been done actually at SendMat, and I got the samples for that. Anyway, so the deal is that this is a sound font of this prepared piano, and it's actually multi-sample, which means that if I say set another variant here and did the same thing again in another region, I would have different sounds on that region. Right? Now, the only control that this controls at the moment is pitch. It's the most obvious one to do, and it's the most logical in comparison to like being on the inside of a piano. That's exactly what would happen if I slid something on the string. It would change the pitch, basically. I could use it to do other things if I wanted to, but that's a whole, I have to sort of see whether those kinds of modifications are warranted or not. So anyway, these are basically sample players, and I have many, many different ones. The only thing is that they're not independent. So, this is, if I change one over here, it's going to change what's down over here as well. So some of these things are not multi-sampled. They're just one sample just spread out across the string, so that basically just does the same thing. So, that's not going to have quite as much of an effect. Many of these techniques, though, are techniques that are my own techniques that I do inside the piano. So, and there's different options. There's different ones. That's a nice sort of like a harmonics thing. This one is, I think. This one. Yeah, that's another sort of prepared piano kind of thing collection from someone else I got. This one is, that's actually taping the piano strings in the really high registers. It didn't go down too far, but but it's now being played at a slower, you know, a lower pitch comparatively speaking. But if we, you know, raise it up, it's kind of cool. My favorite is actually this one here at the end, which is actually a multi-sample, but multi-sampled in terms of velocity switching. So what happens is that if you have different velocities, then it's going to switch the sample. So that that's kind of cool. Be able to go back and forth between the piano sound and the prepared piano sound. So this is I've had a lot of fun performing with this one for sure. Anyway, if I want to clear the assignment that I've made for these particular things, I just click clear single, and then I can just touch this. I have to do it again for each one. It only does one at a time. Future things will be that I can save presets and stuff like that for, you know, preset settings for a lot of things, because it does take a while to sort of set things up, you know, one thing at a time. To go back a little tiny bit, let's see, that's we covered most of that stuff there a little bit. The last one I would mention very briefly is the sampler. The sampler is kind of interesting. It's still kind of a work in progress, but it will make a sound. And this is an example of my playing as well. And I can reverse it. So that's a lot of fun. Anyway, so that's basically that one. Just wanted to talk about a little bit more about the Plaits object. So I was interested in getting synthesizers, and I had been looking at lots of cool synthesizers before. But one of the issues that I kept running into is that people would have all these synthesizers, and they'd have like 30 knobs or 30 sliders or whatever. And it's really difficult to try and figure out how you can perform with 30 sliders. Having too many things under control is just as difficult as not having enough things under control, if not more so. But the deal is that with this particular instrument, it was actually made by Mutable Instruments. The people who make modular synthesizer modules, Olivier Gillet, I believe, is the Olivier Gillet is the programmer. And one of the things that he's actually done, which has really been fantastic for the community, is he's open sourced the DSP code that he uses to run these particular modules, all of them. And he's made it available under a very permissive license. You can't advertise it as the same exact thing, but basically, if you you can do all kinds of stuff with it. And I found an example of someone who had made a pure data object with this. Pure data, of course, is what's running all my audio, all my sounds, and all my synthesizers and stuff like that. So someone made a pure data object out of it, which is really, really awesome. The nice thing about this being a module is that it didn't have enough room to have very many knobs or, you know, controls on it. So therefore, it actually limits how many things can be controlled at one time. And he actually did a really good job of making everything being very musical and very useful, so that even though you only had those 4 controls or 5 controls or whatever, you could really get a lot of variety of sounds out of it. It actually has a number of different modes, I think something like 15 or 16 on the actual module itself. I found about maybe 1 through 7 or so to be the most useful. There's all kinds of stuff that are available. But at least for my particular purposes, I wanted to have lots of cool things. There's one really nice one, is that there's actually an inharmonic string modeler, which does a pretty reasonably good job. It's also very versatile. So, you know, if you do something like this and like that. So Plaits and harmonicas, let's see. And there's lots of different things. Make it brighter, darker. Change the sort of inharmonic modeling a little bit, or it's like a stiff string model basically, so it has the different kinds of physics characteristics. By the way, this bend control is the same thing as the bend control here, so it's just, you know, convenience basically. Anyway, so there's also I have available on I think 3 out of the 4 synthesizers at the moment a different envelope available. These are basically just envelope presets at the moment. I will probably have some actual control over the envelope, but again, having too many things under control does not make a very responsive situation with regards to like really playing in a live performance improvisational setting that's kind of fast and dense, which is what I tend to like the most. So to really have fast action interaction, it's kind of important to do it that way. Anyway, so but we'll see what happens. You know, if I can quickly set envelope settings, you know, it might be worthwhile. In general, I was thinking about more percussive sounds anyway, so I wasn't necessarily thinking about having a wide variety of envelope options because I was thinking about how I tend to do things inside the piano generally. Anyway, but the deal is that there's 2 copies of this Plaits instrument, and there's lots, like I say, there's many different modes. There's an 2-operator FM mode. So lots of pretty cool stuff. Right, and there's a harmonic oscillator even. So very cool. A lot of cool little interesting stuff. Even a particle noise. It's lots of pretty cool. Lots of cool things. But anyway, so these are identical, and I can have these be independent as well. Polyplaits, as I said, was just sort of a thing of its own. Anyway, clear single. It has similar characteristics to the inharmonic modeling, but it is its own sort of thing. It definitely does its own sort of thing, and so that would be... One interesting thing about it is that if you have a mode that has a sustain to it, I actually have a sort of a feedback kind of quality that I can tap into at times, which we'll see how useful that is in a performance setting, but it may be interesting to... So that's kind of interesting. We'll see what happens again in terms of performance and how that all works out. But anyway, and this only really basically has its one mode. It doesn't have multiple modes. So in that particular case, that's where that has. Now, in addition to all of that sort of stuff, clear single, I do also have a bank of effects that I can route things through. So I'll just turn on one of these for right now. I have the ever-present, ever-popular ring modulator. So I'm, at this point, just patching that in by means of a sort of matrix patching situation in PD. I will probably have that matrix patching option here, directly inside here, as available as well. But at the moment, it is only available inside PD. So I have to go there and turn it on if I want to get this kind of routing. I have 5 different effects. I have a decimator, I have a ring modulator, I have a filter, which is basically a low-pass filter with resonance. I have a delay, which is kind of like an old-style tape delay, kind of like. And then I have reverb, which is actually on right now, even though it doesn't look like it is. The reverb is being sent for everything just to make it all nice, smooth, and good quality. But anyway, so I can... So you could do it for multiple instruments. You could do it for all the instruments. You could just do it for only one instrument. Any one of these effects could go just to one instrument or go to several instruments. This, the possibilities are very, very. The options are very unlimited, really, almost. Actually, I should mention one other thing, is that, you know, we had these sliders that were there that did this sort of stuff, that were region-based sliders to do things like that. But we also have sliders that are completely independent of that. So these sliders can be just added to anything, whereas, you know, these sliders, you know, have to be more or less preset based. You know, in other words, I can't just like turn on an effect or something like that for just a small region or whatever that I want. Not yet, not so far. I mean, maybe I may do that in the future, but at the moment, that's not the way that things are going. But if I wanted to have, let's say, control over certain parameters of effects, you know, rather than coming here and having to deal with the smaller things, I wanted to have like a more coarser movement kind of thing, I can basically assign that by setting set single, for example. Boom, ring modulation frequency. Now it changes color, and okay, pretty good. So that's pretty decent. Now, the other thing that is also really cool that I was going to talk about is this page. This page is the what's called the module player, or mod player. I call them mod players. That's right. So the deal is that the mod player is effectively kind of a fancy LFO, but it's a really simple LFO. It's a table-based LFO. So essentially, it's just reading off the table, and it's 128 points by 128 points, and there's actually 3 waveforms that are available. There's sort of a kind of granularish, very like wide-ranging, sort of kind of pointillistic kind of sort of waveform. There's a straight up and down waveform, so you'll hear that right now. And then there's also a sort of a mixture of the two, essentially something slightly more melodic-y, basically, but having moments of sort of granular quality. Anyway, but at the moment, the waveforms are non-adjustable. I can change them inside PD, but I cannot change them here. If I wanted to do that in here, that does mean a bit more programming to try to figure out how I can draw a waveform. And honestly, I didn't actually do that much live when I did live electronics and stuff like that. I didn't usually adjust those waveforms very often at all. But I can play them randomly. I can play them up. I can play them down. I can play them up and down. There's lots of different options. I can also set the range at the moment so that I can go out. Now, how do I assign it? It's actually currently on right now, but it's unassigned to anything. I'm just going to click set single, go like this, and then pick the frequency that I want. And now, there she goes. Up and up and up, like a barber pole. Right? Or if I want, I can put it in random, and then it will just be all crazy. Right? Or if I want to just do the other waveform, and say do that up, so you can hear the... Now there's some future plans for it that I will have a multiplier so that the outputs can be either scaled to larger than the current amount or smaller than the current amount. There's also a smooth control, sort of like a portamento glide between different parameter ranges, but that's all future design. At the moment, I'm going to mess around with what I have and figure out the best way to move forward on that. So overall, that's pretty much it. About the last thing I would mention here is that I have the ability to clear all settings. So for example, if I had a bunch of different settings all happening, I could just hit this clear all button, and then all of the settings get cleared. It is a little bit on the glitchy side, but it does basically work. So that's very useful, because sometimes you don't want to have to sit there and go clear single, clear single, clear single, clear single for everything. Then the last thing to mention is that when I'm doing the switching between elements, and I can actually set up a little quickie thing to show you a little bit of the deal. So I can go set single, let's see, this one here, put it there, set single, this one here, put it there, set single, this one here, put it here. And maybe put that one there. So we have all kinds of stuff. And what's happening is when I'm going between them, I'm actually switching between MIDI channels. So if I get pretty active, at some point inevitably there's going to be a MIDI note that'll be hanging. So you can have it hanging out. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky because sometimes it doesn't like to cooperate. This is all new stuff. That's the Polypluck kind of feeding back there on its envelope 2, which is why envelope 1's safer. But if there's a hanging note of some kind or another that's particularly made because a note didn't get a note off during the MIDI channel switch, the notes off button basically stops all of those notes. And anyway, I think that's basically a good, reasonably in-depth look at this situation as it is. I'll have some demo videos of me playing it and all of that sort of stuff coming up, and then we can then you'll hear more about how this is all working and you know, how it will develop, obviously. All right, thanks.